Buenos noches, America. You are now with the Black Powder Podcast. I am one of your hosts today, the incomparable Marcus Matthews, the only real libertarian, and I will catch fades on that. If you want to fight me to see who's a real libertarian, I am perfectly willing to do so. I just want to get the violent part or the violent segment out of the way before we even get started. And today I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Eric Parker. How you doing, Eric?
Good. Just hanging out. I'm happy to be here.
And our wonderful Florida man representative, Tub, the other real libertarian.
Say it. Use the words. I am the other real libertarian, and I am here having many second thoughts.
Yeah, I can only imagine what those second thoughts are, and we'll probably get to that at some point during the podcast. I'm kind of nervous about that, but at any rate, I want to quickly introduce our guest because this is going to be a very informative episode. We are covering the war on drugs from a variety of viewpoints and whatnot. Mrs. Avens O'Brien. Did I say that right?
It's O'Brien, but yeah, sure.
Well, I wanted to give it a wee bit of the cliche or add it on.
You wanted to give it a little bit of the Irish lilt. I understand.
Yeah,
You're an honorary Black Irishman.
Well,
you got to work on that, Marcus. You got to work on that.
Turning gray, my beard was red, and my mother has reddish hair and green eyes. So I got a wee bit of that somewhere back down the line. There was a late night knock on a shanty door, but we won't get into the historical relevance of my genealogy today.
We're talking
war on drugs, and I want to ask Ms. O'Brien her background and just give everybody a general overview of. We always have interesting guests, and we've had a couple conversations. Our last one was very, very in-depth at a Chase Oliver event, but give us a little background on who you are, and what you do.
Sure. Well, what's interesting is, so I came into the Libertarian Party because my parents were like crazy libertarian activists. So I grew up in the movement. And so that's actually how I kind of got into all of this. Is my parents had been like in the early 70s, kind of like in the objectivist crowd, and like basically going and seeing like Ayn Rand and Murray Rothbard like speak at colleges, and they were like, oh, we love this. So they were like hosting all these events with their friends, co-founded state affiliates for their LPs, and then I just kind of grew up in this really strange like libertarian household. And so it was a really like, it was a strange way to grow up, but I loved it. And I grew up mostly in New Hampshire. And then I was like tagging along with my parents doing LP stuff when I was a kid. And then after 9/11, I basically like, I watched the like 9/11 happen, and I was like, Mom, I need to get involved with your political thing, because this is bad. Like I was like, something's gonna happen here. Like I want to be like against whatever like war is gonna happen. And so from that, so basically in 2002, I started attending like LP New Hampshire events, and I was 14. So I was just like going and getting as involved as possible, like collecting petitions for candidates. 2004, I worked on the Michael Badnarik campaign. And then in 2008, I worked on Ron Paul's campaign. And then 2012, Gary Johnson. 2016, my partner Judd Weiss actually ran for the vice presidential nomination with John McAfee. So he lost to Gary Johnson, but it was still like a really fun ride. And so anyway, that's kind of like how I came up into like LP politics. Is, you know, I've done a lot of like internal crap, like, you know, collecting petitions and working on campaigns, and I was vice chair of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire from 2006 to 2008. And then in 2012, I started taking photographs with my partner at like conventions and stuff. And so that kind of became a way to do activism, is like show up and go to these liberty events and take photos of people and kind of try to show them doing really cool things and show this kind of appealing nature of liberty. Because to me, when I think of libertarianism, like obviously there's this, you know, cohesive philosophy behind it. There's all these, you know, books and references and things I can talk about. But for me, like the reason I'm a libertarian is because I love people and I want them to be free. And so when I think of libertarianism, when I think of like, how do I make libertarianism appeal to other people, is I want to like show human beings being human doing, you know what I mean? I want to show people doing things without government interfering, and show how government interferes and ruins lives. And so that's kind of become my, like, the way that I do all of my activism is about kind of showing not just this idea of like fighting for limited government, but fighting for unlimited individuals, and trying to like glorify and kind of raise up the people in the libertarian sphere and bring other people in to say, look, we're doing something exciting. We're here fighting for you because we love you and we want you to be free. And so that's kind of like, that's my journey in libertarianism. And then I try to use that to inform the way that I do not just my activism, but my, like, I'm an entrepreneur in Los Angeles. And so that's kind of how I inform, like how I try to go about the rest of my life is like, how can I make myself useful in the world, provide value to people, and help them achieve the best that they want. And so that's why I do entrepreneurism.
That's interesting. I wanted to say to your statement that you just made, you know, I have two former guests on here as well. And of the three of you, that was the most profound statement of somebody being motivated to go to the liberty movement. Of all the guests that are even hosting right now, of all the guests that have been on this
the
podcast,
same thing to me. I came on the first time.
Yeah, and you said the same thing to me when I came on the first time.
that's a bunch of malarkey, okay? You know, at any
No,
rate,
I will say, like, Tubb's been a registered libertarian longer than me, but I think Tubb and I both got active around the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, and for different reasons, but similar. The local government tried shutting down or infringing on the small brewery I was working at, and the same government in Jacksonville, Florida, shut down Tubbs Church. So, like, we both were like, once we made it, I guess, reopen, whatever, made it through that, but we never forgot, like, look what they did to us. So we got involved because we felt attacked by government. I was, you know, registered Republican until 2020, but only from, you know, 2006, 2020. I was a Ron Paul, then a Rand Paul. And then I was like, I could see where this is going. And I got out at 2020. So, and then immediately joined the Libertarian Party and ran for local office. So Tubbs been libertarian for a while. I mean, look at his hair. But
I've been doing everything for quite a while. In all reality, well, yeah, because like I've been a registered libertarian for about 19 years now. But I was the typical, I don't do anything. I just complain about everything and don't get involved. But also, like, I always want to point out that our church getting shut down was not COVID related. Yours was COVID related. Mine was just horrible city officials related. Now, Avens, I have a question for you though.
Sure.
So you mentioned, because you got a long list of, hey, involved, like you're out doing things. So as you go about, you must see that there is a high contingency of libertarians that don't really do that much. They were kind of like what I used to be like I'm not going to do anything. Does that aggravate you a little bit, honestly? Like, because you're pretty active.
Yeah, I mean, sort of. I think there's a certain amount of keyboard warrior that bothers me. I think that if people are going to be online and articulating their views, I think that, like, I try not to like shit all over people who are doing things. And like, so even like right now, like, I'm not in leadership at in any of the state parties or national parties. Now, I have lots of opinions about what's going on in my state and national party. And I do like email and go, hey guys, like, I don't think you're doing this well. Or I try to express that, but like, I try to be very careful if I'm not doing something and someone else is going and doing the work. I really try not to like just be like, oh, you're doing it wrong, right? It's like, if you're doing it wrong, I should get up and do what's right, right? I should be the one like showing you how it should be. And so I think that, like, when it comes to the LP, the thing that's interesting is that, like, we need all types of libertarians. We need people who are going to go online and just chit chat with people about what they believe. And we need people who are going to show up at rallies. And we need people who are going to run for office. And we need people who are going to run for, you know, a mind numbing, you know, Robert's Rules of Order, like, you know, position on a board. And we need people who will just show up and do what they're told. I know that sounds ironic for libertarians, but like we need people who will just go, hey, what do you need me to do? You need me to collect petitions? Okay. You need me to run for office? Okay. You need me to manage a candidate? Okay. The thing is that libertarians have a lot of different people who are are capable of doing different parts of the utility of what a libertarian party needs. But the problem is that what happens is like in the Democratic and Republican parties, they have so many more people that they can utilize those casual observers, the people who aren't really doing much. They can say, hey, show up and vote. Hey, show up at this thing. Hey, we're going to give you a thing to do. They email their supporters with pre-written scripts about what you should send to your congresspeople. We need casual libertarians who don't do much, but do like, hey, okay, I need to activate now. We need those people. We need those people who are casually like, hey, I just like Gary Johnson better than Trump or Hillary. We need people who are casually libertarian and who aren't willing to do much work, because we need those people to follow the people who are going to do a bunch of work. And the problem is we don't have enough people. But what I hate is when you get involved in LP stuff, a lot of times people will be like, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? You have to kind of like prove your bona fides. And then what'll happen is someone will get kind of scared off because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to help. They're just kind of casually into this. They didn't read Rothbard. They don't know what you're saying when you talk about subjective value theory or whatever. And they're so overwhelmed. And then we scare them off. And what we need to do is say like, hey, that's cool. You can be a casual libertarian and we'll let you know when there's events. We'll let you know when there's things you can do. We'll let you know how you what's your issue? Do you care about education? Do you care about healthcare? Do you care about these things? How can we use you in a way that's that can be casual? And unfortunately, we're just right now we're so starved for people that we're constantly demanding so much of everybody. Of course, everybody's fucking burnt out. I'm sorry, I give long ass answers.
No, because you're doing
that was
most
good.
of the talking. Yeah, you're going to be doing most of the talking anyway, because continuing on with my theme for the night. There's some people here in this podcast. Just the sound of their voice, the octave of their voice is like nails on a chalkboard to me.
Hey,
and when I hear either one of them talk, I just feel like gritting my teeth and clenching my fist. And
I feel the same way about Tub.
well, I had a pretty good run.
I'm just kidding. No,
Well,
that was good. I think that's a good segue into the topic.
Well, the topic for today's podcast was the war on drugs, and I think at this current time in the United States, this is something that should resonate with the whole of the United States, considering the so-called fentanyl crisis and just the prevalence of hard drugs. One of the points I wanted to bring up, I was thinking, was Mary J. Ruert speaks to the war on drugs often, and she says, the war on drugs has caused deaths because the quality of the drugs has gone down tremendously because of the prohibition state that we're in. And so these people cut more and more corners, and you're seeing that on a regular basis now with kids ODing off fentanyl because they're getting the crappiest drugs. And where I think libertarians could really sound lucid and an actual party is our position on the war on drugs. We get asked a bunch of social issue questions, and individual liberty scares the living crap out of Democrats and Republicans. They don't want nothing to do with it because government is daddy. So, like I said, this is the war on drugs episode, and we wanted to start off with Avens. Where do you? This is a loaded ass question. Where do you stand on the war on drugs?
Well, you see, I am a soldier in the war for drugs, and I'm very excited to report that we're winning. So that's actually one of my favorite ways to introduce myself when I give a speech. I was at Freedom Fest last year, the year before, and I literally introduced myself. I said, "Hi, my name is Avens O'Brien. I'm a soldier in the war for drugs. That's not on drugs. That's for drugs, and I'm happy to report that we're winning." And the fact is, for me, I've always philosophically been on board with the decriminalization and legalization of drugs. That's the benefit of growing up with parents who were libertarians, and also my parents were part of the kind of hippie movement with like Timothy Leary and stuff. Timothy Leary, by the way, used to do like a bunch of LP shit. And I don't know if anybody knew that, but so, you know, like the father of psychedelics with with all this, you know, LP stuff. So I grew up with like my parents saying, "Oh yeah, you know, like we did peyote in college," or you know that kind of like openness about both psychedelics, cannabis. I mean, neither of them had done like hard drugs, but as a result, like I was always philosophically there anyway. And then I think, you know, in my teens, I like lots of people, I just started experimenting with mostly like cannabis and then psychedelics. And you know, it's like I was already there philosophically. And then I was like, of course they don't want us doing these things because one, like the way that like psychedelics open your mind and make you think about the world and make you think about like the harm that we can do upon each other through things like government, like that sort of thing really just like clicked much more instinctively with me. But also just like realizing too is that like I already know the government's a fucking liar, but like now I'm like, oh yeah, you definitely were lying to everybody there. And so my kind of journey into it was that like, you know, I just like I've never been somebody that went, oh, that's illegal, so I can't do it. I've never been somebody who thought that way at all. So it was like, oh, that's illegal. I should be careful about how I do it so I don't get in trouble while I do it. But I'm going to do it anyway. And so I definitely like explored in mostly psychedelics. And then I got really into helping other people do them. So I started doing like trip sitting for people who were taking drugs for the first time. And I did that in Las Vegas a whole lot. And then I've kind of like, I've worked in the like decrim space and like working on trying to like kind of educate people. And in fact, in 2006, I worked for Common Sense for New Hampshire drug policy that was specifically about trying to decriminalize marijuana in New Hampshire. And yeah, that was not easy because New Hampshire really is behind the times on that one. But which is ironic.
Yeah.
But the fact was like I had been doing that kind of stuff, and my partner Judd also is like very into that. He used to like deal LSD in high school, like he was all about this stuff. And so we kind of bonded over libertarianism and our love of psychedelic drugs. And then in 2017 we started a cannabis company. And then after seeing the regulatory environment in California and how terrible it was, we basically pivoted to magic mushrooms. And so that's actually what I do as a career is I work with magic mushrooms, and I help people grow their own magic mushrooms, and I teach people about psychedelics in general, but also magic mushrooms and just like how to grow them, how to do them, how to enjoy them, and I do a bunch of lobbying work to try to decriminalize them across the country.
Speaking
Okay,
of
so-
magic, I thought Tub is just boiling over right there. Stuff is it. I'm sorry, Eric.
Well, I was gonna say, like, you pivoted from cannabis to psilocybin because of the regulatory burdens, specifically in California, or federal and state. And why is it easier or less stringent on psilocybin than cannabis for California? Is it taxes? Basically?
So partially. So California used to have a medicinal environment, and the medical environment was actually relatively easy to become a cannabis entrepreneur in. Like you just had to, like, you know, you connected with a farm, you produce, you know, you bought pounds, produced in like, you know, whatever you're selling, like eighths, or like in our case we were selling pre-rolls, and then you kind of go through the step-by-step process. And then there was no, because it was a medical product, there wasn't taxes on it. And so when it went legal, the good news was that like it was theoretically going to help like prevent people from going to prison for. And here's the thing: is like I'm all about keeping people out of fucking cages, especially government cages. And so I want to see these things legalized and decriminalized. But the thing that was so hard is that basically California was like, let's, you know, oh, we're going to let you do this. Now we're going to be in your pockets. And it was like especially bad. You know, they've made licenses for farms, for manufacturers, for distributors, and for stores. All of those licenses are tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. They created a system in which like it became hard. Like you couldn't just like sign up, pay the fee, and get it. Like they had you jump through all these hoops. There was a social equity clause that was like basically wanting cannabis businesses to be owned in part by people who had felony drug conviction records. Now, people who have felony drug conviction records don't typically have the capital to start companies. And so what that does is it creates a situation where like big players in the space with, you know, like armed with lawyers will grab some random person who has this and say, hey, we're going to give you a percentage of our company on paper. You're not going to have any rights of like, you're not going to have any control. We're just going to say that you're a partial owner. We're going to get this license that we can't get. We're going to be like get boosted to the front of the line as a result of this. And then we're just going to keep paying you a stipend for a while until that like regulation goes away. And then you're going to basically write off your percentage of the company.
That's crazy.
And so that was the thing is that it became like increasingly harder. And then of course there was an excise tax of 15% on every step of the process. And so it basically it kills the little guys. Everybody who was a small business, including us, we couldn't keep up with those regulations. We couldn't financially handle that. We couldn't make a profit. And if you can't make a profit, you can't handle weather the storms of your company, or even just become something where you can be like, cool, I'm proud of this thing that I've made. So we struggled for 2 years under it, and then we were like, all right, this is too much. Now I don't know, I'm really happy to have just moved into psilocybin, and I'll explain what that's about in a second. But even if the regulatory environment was what if it wasn't that bad in cannabis, I'm sure it would have stayed to some degree. But I'm glad I did the pivot simply because the cannabis industry became huge and there were lots of people involved. And so it's I'm always looking for what's next. I want to be the pioneer. I want to be the person, as Judd likes to say, which is my partner, he likes to talk about when you go through the jungle and you're hacking with a machete, you're the first person to make that path. And, you're going to encounter things that nobody else is going to encounter, but it's more dangerous, but it's more rewarding. And we're that kind of people. So we love doing that. But yeah, that's why it's not profitable to go into cannabis in California.
So is the shrooms easier to get involved in than it is the cannabis?
So the thing about shrooms that's interesting is that shrooms are explicitly illegal in California still. There's a couple of municipalities that have their own rules about them, including Oakland, California. Basically, they're the lowest level of enforcement. And so they've basically got decrim in Oakland. But what's really fascinating is that it's become a very low priority to law enforcement in California in general. So you see there are shroom companies all over this state now. And it's just really fascinating because right now the cannabis industry is everything's tracked from seed to sale. So it's really hard to move any cannabis around. But when it comes to mushrooms, it's all still underground. So it just very quickly goes, okay, we're going to have, mushrooms over here, mushrooms over there. The thing that I did with my company is that Judd and I basically, we founded Advanced Mycology. And what we specialized in was we decided instead of selling the end product, which is what we were doing in cannabis, we were selling pre-rolls, we decided when there's a gold rush, the thing to invest in is picks and shovels. And so what we did instead is we basically invested our time into grow kits, but not the end product. So what we sell is a sterilized bag of soil and grain that is basically manufactured to be the perfect thing to grow mushrooms in. And then we also sell the genetics. And neither of these two products are illegal by themselves because genetics can be used for testing purposes. They don't they're just under their own little thing. It's just mushroom genetics. And they can be any kind of genetics. And then the grow bag is literally just a bag of soil and grain. So there's nothing illicit about it. When the customers purchase these two items and they put them together, they are then growing something that is illegal, but that's not our business.
I mean, that's no different than purchasing a home brew kit and yeast and sugar and letting it ferment, and then you have it and you can home brew back in Florida basically as much as you want. But as soon as you sold it without a license, once again, government getting in the way of your own industry, entrepreneurship. You wanted to be a home brewer, microbrewery, they would make the beer license difficult to get. So, I mean, it's similar, but obviously way different effects, IPA and psilocybin. But yes, like essentially I like it. I think it's a good way to get around the regulatory burdens. And
we're sold in all 50 states. We sell these little kits in all 50 states. That's how easy it is. $50, $30. The culture is $30 as well. But like we're sold in all 50 states. We've sold in 700 plus stores across the country. We sold 200,000 units in the last 3 years, 2.5 years.
Gotcha.
So, like I said, so it truly is. You guys were able to make this industry by mass non-compliance. You basically said we're going to do this even though it's illegal, and it got to such a point where they don't even want to be bothered with it. So basically, you're illegal, but nobody cares. Is that right?
No, the grow bags aren't illegal at all. Okay. The industry. So in California right now, what's really fascinating is like we're doing this thing, and this thing is like is perfectly legal because all it is a bag of soil and grain and genetics. There are all sorts of people selling mushroom chocolates and mushroom gummies and analogs of those things like 4-ACO, which is like a new analog of psilocybin. It's really fascinating because those things have just come out in mass quantities, and people like, one, the government can't keep up, and those things often like they're sold in these like kind of small bursts here and there at pop-up shops and things like that. So I just been it's been really fascinating because it feels like it's like when you're on the highway and everybody's going a little fast, like the cop's not going to pull you over for going 10 miles an hour. Right. And so, you know, here we are, and we're technically following the rules, and there's a bunch of people speeding past us, but everybody's kind of going the same speed. So the cop doesn't have anyone to stop. So it's really fascinating. And it's one of my favorite things about California is people bitch about like, you know, we're California, or, oh my God, we're so compliant. But like when Californians decide they don't give a shit anymore, they just don't give a shit anymore. And it's really fun because like, you can't stop us. There's too many of us. We just go, hey, we're fine with mushrooms now. And everybody's fine with mushrooms now.
So I think Marcus, I think you got something to say, but I got a point and I'll forget it. But like those, those chocolate or the chocolates with mushroom in them, are those like being sold in like your head shop, or are these like, you know, the gray market, the black market, or are they like storefronts? You walk in, you see the kratom, the CBD, the THC, and then you go ask the guy, yo, you got some chocolates with psilocybin?
Honestly, I see a little bit of everything. So we see them in head shops and smoke shops. There's a shop in Venice right now called Shroomland, and they say explicitly, they say we don't sell any psilocybin, and like and technically none of their products say they contain psilocybin. I'm not going to comment on whether or not any of their products do, but people use all sorts of euphemisms the way that they used to use for cannabis. Like we used to say everything was hemp and things like that. There's all sorts of euphemisms in the mushroom space. You can call them fruiting bodies. You call them fruit. You call them and then on top of that, now like there's still an industry of actual mushrooms, but we're now seeing a huge increase in specifically like extracts and people using an analog. And so actually basically just like synthetically making a variation of psilocybin. And so a lot of the things that are sold in stores, and they're sold in head shops, smoke shops, gas stations, you know, like kind of special interest shops, like sex toy shops, like all sorts of random places are selling these little like magic gummies and road trips and things like that. And what they actually contain is typically an analog to psilocybin, but but people are just doing them and enjoying them and having a great time. But they're absolutely just sold like out on the market. Like you don't have to go to some sketchy place to get them. When you drive from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, there's a in Prim, Nevada, there's a gas station that almost everybody stops at. I always stop to fuel up my Tesla, but there's a gas station, and behind the counter, there's this company called Treehouse. Treehouse is selling magic mushroom gummies. They don't contain psilocybin mushrooms, but they contain an analog that will totally trip you out.
Awesome. It just completely reminded me of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. That's like one of my favorite movies from back in the day. You have a question here from the Liberty Lady, and it reads as Avens. Can you talk about any newer studies showing how psychedelics are helping people with PTSD, especially veterans?
Yeah, so we've been seeing a lot of promising returns on psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine. I think there's been less research on LSD still, but specifically those three, ketamine, psilocybin, and MDMA. So the FDA recently had. They were supposed to be approving a thing for an MDMA study, and they came up with some bullshit reason they couldn't. They were like, no, this isn't good enough, or some shit. And I the details of it would escape me right now, but like you can look it up, and it's infuriating. But the thing is that psilocybin has been shown to have various antidepressant qualities, and I found especially people are like microdosing as a regimen that seems to kind of help and replace their use of SSRIs. And of course, like, I am not a doctor. I am not advising this as a doctor, but what I'm seeing literally in my community and group of friends and whatever is people are going like, hey, where can I get microdose mushrooms? And these are like 50 milligrams of mushrooms. And they're taking these instead of taking their SSRIs, and they're finding that like their mood is improved, their depression is subsiding, their anxiety is subsiding. People use it for ADHD. And I mean, I always feel really skeptical when I see when somebody goes like, oh, like, CBD, have you tried CBD for that? And it's like a CBD is a cure all for all things. And I hate that. Like the same way, like psilocybin has been shown to have applications for depression and ADHD. We're seeing a little bit with PTSD, though actually MDMA has been shown to be very valuable for PTSD. And then for very, very strong cases of depression, like suicidal depression, ketamine has been researched, has been fantastic. And actually ketamine clinics are already perfectly legal across the country. And you can go to a clinic and do a ketamine infusion. And it actually helps with suicidal depression. So and a lot of people do a regimen of a ketamine infusion, and then they start doing microdose mushrooms to kind of like stave off like any kind of depressive tendencies. But PTSD, MDMA is particularly applicable for PTSD, and ketamine specifically for like suicidal depression. And it's just like fascinating, like the things that we're observing. And here's the thing, I'm going to bring this back to why the drug war is fucking evil, is because in 1971, the drug war began, and that is when we stopped doing research on these substances. So there is 50 years of research that we just didn't get to do. And so people were doing, psychonauts were doing it. People were going, hey, this cured my depression. But they weren't allowed to put that in papers. They weren't allowed to put that in some sort of like legally, like verifiable, control tested, whatever. And so now we're doing a bunch of research, like a bunch of fucking children, where a bunch of us are like, yeah, of course it does that. But like the science and the government approved shit, in order, like, because of the drug war, like they're learning this at the, like, right now for the first time, and they're like, oh, well, we need more studies. We've been doing studies for 50 fucking years, and like we've been doing studies unofficially for 50 fucking years. We know what these things can do, and they can save lives, and the government kept it from us.
Wait, so for people like Tub, what's a SSRI?
An SSRI is and SSRI is an antidepressant. There's a couple. There's SSRIs and then MAOIs. Sorry, I'm like I if I get that wrong, I would be like,
do
so
you
mad
think
at myself.
Tub needs to be on antidepressants?
No, what was funny, I knew that for that to be an antidepressant. So I did know that one. All right.
Well,
I have friends.
Benzos, right? Benzodiazepine is a SSRI, isn't it?
Benzos are not SSRIs, but benzos. The thing is that, so an SSRI is a serotonin something reuptake inhibitor. I'm gonna get it wrong, but it's the idea is that basically what it does is it's basically putting chemicals into your body that are going to respond to a particular receptor. It's going to respond to your, like, I think it's your 5-HT receptor. I could have that one wrong, but it's one of your receptors that specifically works with serotonin, and SSRIs pop in and basically like feed that receptor, and it's particularly useful for people who have depression, who have like problems with their serotonin uptake. And then the downside, ironically, is that if you're taking, like, let's say you're on an SSRI and then you take like psilocybin, that receptor is busy with the SSRI, and so sometimes the receptor doesn't actually like receive the psilocybin. And so a lot of people, in order to have a beneficial experience with psilocybin, have to go off their SSRIs for a few days in order to like have that receptor clear so that the psilocybin can go in and do its magic. So anyway, that's some fun little brain chemistry for you.
The only reason why I brought up benzos is because I've heard of stories of people microdosing psilocybin to help fight their addictions, specifically alcohol and nicotine. But I don't know if there's ever been any studies or proof that it helps wean people off benzos also. So that's the only reason why I was like, I thought, but you know,
I definitely know. I know that psilocybin has definitely been used to help wean people off of certain addictive drugs. I don't know about benzos. I don't necessarily see a reason why not, but also like that's a theory. I know for a fact that there are people who are taking things like psilocybin and ayahuasca to get themselves off of fucking heroin. Like, that's what's amazing, is people are literally weaning themselves off of terribly addictive hard drugs using psilocybin, because their bodies, just like they need dopamine, they need serotonin, they need a reset, and these things can produce resets that are non-addictive, because you can't get addicted to psilocybin or LSD or anything like that.
Okay, so like I personally know a lot of people who smoke marijuana, and it's not about a high for them. It's about pain relief. It's about kind of settling the brain down a little bit. So it's not about high. So do you find that that's also with shrooms now, that people are kind of using it's not about a high, but they're finding other uses out of it? It kind of for basically medicinal.
Yes. So the thing is that a lot of times with psilocybin specifically, it won't necessarily quiet your brain down. It might turn things up a little bit. So it's not going to be used the same way as weed. However, people microdose psilocybin, and the reason for it, like when you microdose psilocybin, like a full dose of psilocybin, if you were like, I want to trip balls right now, I would tell you to take 3.5 grams of mushrooms. And if you were like, I want to microdose, I would tell you to take 50 milligrams, which is basically like a 70th of that. And so the reason for that is because when you take microdose amounts, what we see is that it's subperceptual. You don't have like a trip experience. You don't have like visuals. You don't have like, you're not tripping, but you feel like a little bit of mental clarity, a little bit of like mood uplift. And what you end up having is this kind of like the subperceptual experience that starts to like heal patterns in your brain. And that's what's really fascinating, is that like you'll find that like when you have like anxiety, or you have depression, or you have like these kind of overwhelming feelings, like it will just start kind of repairing the neurons that are having those issues. And that's what's really incredible about psilocybin, is it does seem to be brain food. It does seem to enable us to do more with our brains and to clear up like the junk that's in there.
I think they're
a percentage of
fact
people
check me.
Oh, go, Eric, please. I'll just sit here quietly.
Well, sorry. Well, back to the repairing the neurons. There have been studies, I think at Johns Hopkins, I don't know, but of veterans with traumatic brain injury, and using psilocybin to repair the neurons in their brain.
Yep, it's very.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Tub.
No, I'm good.
That is 100%. TBIs are like the biggest thing right now, is traumatic brain injury for athletes. It's funny because so like my company works with Mike Tyson, and Mike has never like come out and been like, oh yeah, I had traumatic brain injury from my fighting, and that's why I take mushrooms. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually part of like what was making it so beneficial for him.
Okay, Tub, you may speak now.
No, I don't want to. I'm good. Go ahead.
Okay.
Marcus.
All right, how about this, Tub? I'm gonna go walk away and get a beer.
My own business.
Go ahead.
Well, Well, he stepped out. Our friend Tub, he's in Jacksonville, Florida, correct? And that's
Yes.
up near. How far are you from the Georgia border?
Roughly from my house,
Oh, how far?
roughly 20 minutes or so.
Okay, so he's not going to be affected by the hurricane. We just want to tell our fellow Americans that we express our concern for them as they face this massive storm. I also want to express my concern for them about their governor and how much of a JA he is. And in Florida, you guys have a Amendment 3 coming up, according to that Liberty lady, where you probably are going to have a worse regulatory environment as far as recreational weed goes than California. The thing that struck me about California is we had Colorado and Oregon as examples prior to quote unquote legalizing it recreational wise. And California decided to reinvent the wheel. Gavin Newsom could regulate the fun out of a act between a man and, for Tubbs' sake, an act between a married man and woman. Tubbs, I'm trying to appeal to his sensibilities, but Gavin Newsom could regulate the fun out of that. You know what I mean?
I love the fact that you can't say it because I'm sitting here. You can't even speak because I'm sitting here.
Well, you intimidate me.
It's sex. You could say it.
Well, I was going to say BJ, and Gavin Newsom. That's how much. And you guys forced it out of me. I wanted to remain reasonable. You guys forced it out.
All right. Yeah. You crossed the line.
Oh, I'm a habitual line.
I'm offended.
I wrote down some notes yesterday as I was thinking about this brilliant podcast that I'm hosting, and it just like what I tell Spike, he wouldn't be here without me. Tub and Eric wouldn't be here without me. Avens,
I wouldn't be here.
I'm a kingmaker, so yeah. But the thing about politicians, and I'm sure that I'm not the first one that had this profound thought, but they create problems and then sell you the fix. And government is a self-sustaining beast. And that's why you see, like, when California had its rec legalization, what Florida's about to do is, although they met on the outside, they're granting you these liberties that you were already born with, because the only entity that has ever taken away your liberty is government, not your neighbor, not somebody who has a different candidate sign in their yard that you're going to vote against or whatever. That's not the threat to you. The threat to you is and always has been government. And government is the reason this war on drugs has added $3 trillion. That's what a lot of conservatives don't want to talk about, the cost of the war on drugs. And not to mention the lives, but the cost alone, we're talking 50 years, over $3 trillion. And people like Avens are just taking our money and running. She's out there being a warrior for drugs, and she is killing it. And so I wanted to ask you, where do you think as a society, because if you look at crime and crime statistics, inevitably, in my conservative estimates, at least 70% of crime is related to drugs. And the fact that there's bad drugs out there on the street and we don't have programs to steer people away from that. And we look at our societal ills, and inevitably, like a homeless crisis in LA, they're always like, oh, it's drugs, drugs, it's drugs. What are we doing about that? We're not getting to the root causes of these issues. And when Richard Nixon invoked the war on drugs, he said he wanted two things to come out of it. He wanted to put hippies on the nightly news for weed and black people on the nightly news for heroin. So it had a nefarious start to begin with. And, we can't get our politicians brave enough to say this is wrong. And that's where I think libertarians miss some of the messaging that, this election cycle that we could have used.
Well, you know the thing is, it's a dangerous and slippery slope, because here's what happens once you go out, and I get this a lot because y'all know, like, I've never used any drugs at all, but I will go out and I will talk about, hey, why are these illegal? Why I always let people make that decision for themselves. And so once I go out and I start saying something about, hey, why don't we decriminalize it? Why don't we legalize it? What are our options here? They automatically jump to the assumption of, well, it's for me because I want to get high. And so we kind of counter that. So that's why I think that the Libertarian Party as a whole has been kind of lumped in. What do they usually refer to as Republicans who want to get high?
Yeah.
And so we kind of, I don't think we've done enough to counteract what's going on. I don't think we as libertarians, even though we have a pretty hard stand inside of our own circles, I don't think we're doing so well getting it out of our circles that they can see it. It's not just for us to get high, but we're trying to show personal freedom for everybody inside of it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's where, if you point out the regulatory burdens and how there are studies that have to jump through all these hoops just to be able to study PTSD or traumatic brain injury, and I hate to use but the political a pawn of veterans, but I'm a veteran, so I get it. I've lost friends to suicide. So, like, if you are able to make the point, like, this could help people and save lives and save the taxpayers' money, why can't we convince everyone to get on board? And that's the problem, is like, Democrats allegedly support, ending the war on drugs, or at least they used to. You don't hear them talk about it anymore because they also support big government and the DEA and the whatever, all of the other three-letter agencies that are involved with the drug war. They're part of their big government plan, in my opinion.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for 1 second here. Oregon, quote unquote, legalized drugs. What was that, about 4 years back? And then they recriminalized them, citing overdoses and crime, so to speak. Also, that Liberty lady, please don't encourage Eric. I won't stand for that here. If you get the hell out of here.
I think that Liberty lady might actually be Eric.
Yeah, that's probably good. But and so Oregon reversed it, and that goes to show anything government touches ends up in failure. They couldn't even get legalizing drugs right because they still had that environment where they had all of these bad chemicals coming into our communities. Because China, basically, if I could use a Trump euphemism, China. There's yeah. First of all, the worst part about that whole thing with China is between them and India, they create all the precursors for all our pharmaceutical drugs. That's a national security threat as it is. And America's government is not smart enough to see that, with everybody on cholesterol and high blood pressure pills and everything else. You're getting your precursors from somebody you're constantly saying we may go to war with them. Even though I always say that there will be no war with China. You can't send cargo ships one way and cruise missiles the other way. It's just never going to happen. But with that being said, Oregon, how did they, Avens, I'm sure you know about it, but how do you think they messed that up, aside from the bad drugs?
So I think there's a couple factors. And one of the things that's like really essential is that like I'm all about I'd like to see these things kind of happen state by state by state, where we like decriminalize and legalize whatever. But the drug war is fucking enormous and it's worldwide. And the problem is that a lot of the like externalities of the drug war are bigger than just like the state of Oregon, right? So Oregon has its own problems because like you say, okay, you can't get in trouble for this anymore. And frankly, like, great, like people should not go to prison for drug use. Like it's just like that. I like the fact that there are people out there that still sometimes like defend that. Just like I'm just like, really, seriously, like. But the thing is that like, when it comes to talking about why the drug war should end, I always try to talk about both the conservative and the liberal arguments for it. Is like, the freedom, my body, my choice, the freedom to do what I want with my body. I talk to like the liberal argument of like, hey, like Black people of color, and also like like just minorities in general, but like disenfranchised groups are going to have a worse time with any law that gets passed. Basically, like anytime a law gets passed, it's like I am much more likely to be carrying drugs than you, Marcus, but you're the one who's going to get pulled over and fucked over for it.
Thank
And
you
so
for pointing
like,
that out. Yeah.
Bad example.
but the fact is, like, so I can talk about any of those things, and I what I hate sometimes is that I feel like libertarians will be like, no, we have to have like a one size fits all answer, and the fact is that like when I talk to conservatives, I talk about the fact that the drug war has cost trillions of dollars. It's a fiscally irresponsible thing to do, and it also destroys families. And when we talk to conservatives, we talk about families. We talk about the fact that we're lacking fathers in the homes. Where do you think those fathers are? They're in fucking prison. And so like. Anyway, so that's not the answer to Oregon. That's the answer to like the broader thing. But the fact is, like, the drug war, like the actions of the federal government in the drug war, in making these things illegal, in also the drug war that occurs through the prescription market, because this is something people don't talk about. They think about the drug war and they're like, oh, like weed and shrooms and heroin and fentanyl, whatever. But the fact is, like, the FDA controls the supply of things like painkillers, ADHD medication, anti-anxiety medication. So you can't get Adderall, you can't get Xanax, you can't get, oxycodone unless the federal government allows companies to produce it, right? And to produce it at particular rates. That's why women who have just underwent C-sections are not getting fucking painkillers, even though they just like cut a baby out of their fucking stomachs. And then like you see like people having just undergone major surgeries and not getting painkillers. So because they're like, oh, people are getting addicted to these painkillers and we can't have them on them, or people are getting addicted to ADHD medications. But you know what happens is that people who can't access those start going to underground sources. They start going to like try to find their painkillers. They try to find their, ADHD medications. And so what they end up on is meth and fucking fentanyl. And it's because like they're in actual pain. The government broke their legs, tried to sell them crutches, but then said, no, you can't use those crutches. And so it's this perpetuated thing because the federal government still makes these things controlled. They still make it harder to access the things that you need, the actual like medications you actually need. So then you have people then going into the black market. They're seeking things like heroin, or they're just, even just like pain pills that they're going to get from Mexico, hopefully, or whatever. And then those things are infiltrated with things like fentanyl. And here's the thing, like, I'm actually not a broad-based conspiracy theorist about like, oh, the government did this, the government did that. But the fact is that during Prohibition with alcohol, the government actually poisoned supplies of alcohol in order to scare people off from doing alcohol. And like the fact that we don't think that the government is capable of putting fentanyl in street drugs in order to make sure that you're scared shitless about doing street drugs, like the idea that that's not happening is just completely asinine to me, because of course that's happening. Of course the government would want to do everything it can to scare you out of trying your other solutions. And so what happens is you have this federal apparatus, which is like, and I haven't even gotten into all of the federal apparatus that creates this condition in which the drug war fucking sucks. But then on top of that, you have all these people who just like, who need help, who have addictions, who needed painkillers and now have an addiction. Congratulations, you're no longer like just in pain, you also are now addicted to something. And you can't get the right kind of help or resources, because the fact is, like, not that I want government resources spent on, I want government resources given back to the people, but like if the government's going to spend resources, I'd rather it spend it on getting people off of addictive substances, not sticking them in prison for addictive substances. The fact is, people overdose in prison constantly. People buy drugs in prison constantly because the government is so incompetent at fighting the drug war. It can't even fight the drug war in fucking prisons, which it owns.
Yeah, that's incredible. And Eric, he was in the military when Afghanistan was. It was Afghanistan, right?
I went to Iraq.
You were Iraq. My bad. I almost said a
stolen valor. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
almost said a joke there, but I'm a refrain from such. But it's ironic to me that the fentanyl crisis arose out of the oxycodone crisis that arose out of the United States flooding the market with heroin when they allowed the Afghans to start growing heroin again to keep them pacified. The United States foreign policy is wholly and entirely responsible. And to Abin's point earlier, and to my point, is the self-feeding beast that the government is, right, Tub?
Yeah, we spent $7.6 billion in Afghanistan. I actually had real notes and stuff. Real show
Yeah.
prep. You should try it,
Oh
Mark.
wow!
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, I was
$0.6 billion in Afghanistan to keep it down.
gonna say, cue the Geraldo Rivera video of him interviewing the Marines that are like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And they're like, "We're securing these poppy fields." Like, what?
Right.
Like, yeah, we're making sure no one touches essentially the drug supply that's gonna come to America. Basically, big pharma.
Yeah.
And
'Cause the
I back to the the conspiracy theory that why wouldn't our government poison street drugs. I've always had the thought that like no proof to back it up, but it doesn't make sense for the drug cartel to poison their customers. Why would they want to kill their customer base with fentanyl? If their goal is profit and money and power and control, they need alive customers to purchase their drugs. So why would they put, and then of course, then you get the conspiracy theory, I don't know if there's any proof that, China is putting the fentanyl in the drugs coming from Colombia or South America or wherever. You know what I mean? Like, or Afghanistan for that matter. So, I mean, I've always been like, why would the business kill their customer base intentionally?
See, to play devil's advocate to that, I would counter with a McDonald's argument because McDonald's food is literally killing its customers. But people are, pick your poison, so to speak. And I'm not big.
Slow killer.
The what?
McDonald's is a slow killer, though. I mean, they got it for 50 years before they killed them. And what Eric is saying is there's a better chance it happens immediately. So it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to taint your own stuff, because not only do you run the risk of losing your customers, but that word will get out. And then they'll just be like, hey, don't go to that person because their stuff is going to kill you, dude. So stay away. So I think I'm down with Eric's thinking, and it kind of goes along with what you were saying, Avens, about the prohibition stuff, that if government can scare you into not doing it. So if they take some drugs that are running around on the streets, hey, maybe it'll scare people not to do it. Government has no problem killing some people to make a point.
Yeah.
Well, this, that whole, with the how do you say it again? I'm kind of upset that Eric was able to say the chemical name for magic mushroom.
Psilocybin.
Well, yeah, because I think we had a whiskey rebellion where directly after we gained our independence, well, some of us gained our independence. I don't want to offend Tub. But people started distilling whiskey and selling it, and the government was like, hey, you can't do. George Washington sent troops to kill Americans because they were selling whiskey without tax stamps. And that's something that I see the next phase. I don't know if we're gonna. Well, the government has already come after people and killed them. There was a cop in Houston that was just found guilty of setting up this couple. The couple and their dog died because they did a no-knock warrant saying he bought heroin from this house, and it was all a setup. They found a small quantity of weed and cocaine. They were just having a good time. Had little Rufus, their lap dog, and the cops busting their house, and they started shooting at the cops. Right.
So it looks like Tubbs got some notes. I'm gonna say rapid fire, Tubbs. Just read them all right now, and we'll go.
No. I'm just okay. So
you got 2 minutes. Go.
What you said about the tax thing. Okay, so the Marijuana Tax Act, what was it, 1937? They didn't have a problem with people having possession or using marijuana. Their problem was they didn't pay taxes on them, and that's what got them in trouble.
Yeah, and then
they don't care about your health. Government doesn't care about your health. Government cares about government, and government cares about being funded so they can have more government. So that's exactly what their issue was. It was they didn't care anybody was getting high. They were mad because people were getting high without paying the government to be allowed to do it.
They didn't get their cut, and
there's the thing about the mob, like they got what's his face from not by like
Al Capone.
As like he's coming to me. It's like the tax burden. I actually have two friends who had a huge federal case for psilocybin And it was a huge thing. They were based out of Vegas, and the reason the government got them was because they weren't paying taxes, and they clearly had lots of money coming in, and like it was just wild to me. I was just like, holy shit. Because I mean, they bought their employees all like Teslas and stuff like that. Like it was a huge like bust. And it was like they were selling like lots of psilocybin on like the Silk Road and shit. And like allegedly, I guess I'm supposed to say that. I don't know. I think the court case was like conviction, but whatever it is, like the fact is like the government got them for taxes, not like they did get them for like, here's this big crime. But the reason the government bothered to investigate them was because they were like, you have a lot of money coming in and you haven't paid you haven't given us our pocket. Like
that's the real mafia.
It's really seriously like, ugh.
Right. So
what else you got on that list?
Listen, y'all ain't ready for my show prep. Listen, I'm just telling you. Y'all can play your little podcast games. I'm bringing all right.
All right. Well, pop one off. Go ahead. Pop off one round.
No, because what I did is like
office pop.
I was going back because there's a number of things. I'm like, because I grew up in the just say no generation.
As did I. Yeah.
That was it was constantly put into my head growing up that we don't do this. You say no, you say no, you say no. And it was funny because that was a Reagan thing. But you find out it was long before Reagan. You know, where government was saying, hey, don't do this. But it's so funny that how they play both sides of this. And that's what government does. They tell you, government, that was a big government program. Just say no and anything along those lines. Government's telling you don't do it, while at the same time, they're the ones that are actually putting it out there also. So it's government playing both sides of it. It's government saying, hey, look over there, basically, while we kill you over here with it.
Well, that's how Reagan funded his wars in Central America with the Sandinistas and all that stuff. And people want to
three-way Ricky Ross.
Yeah, people wonder why Central America is in such disarray. A few of those countries down there. People wonder why MS-13 is such a hardcore organization. Those were all spawned off those issues, and that gang was directly spawned off the war on drugs. Yep. That is absolutely the truth and the fact behind it. There's no conspiracy theory to that.
So can I ask a question then, I guess for all of us? As libertarians, if we want to move the concept of decriminalizing, legalizing these drugs, what is our best argument? And remember, it's got to be an argument that not just libertarians go, that's great. What can we use as an argument to sell the people outside of the Libertarian Party to make them kind of go, okay, yeah, I think we can kind of get on board with you. What does that look like?
So honestly, I think one of the things that we struggle with a lot of times is like libertarians want to we want the silver bullet of like the one argument that gets everybody, but we're individuals. We know that people are individuals, and the silver bullet's going to be different for different people. And so I think cultivating like a cohesive argument in which you can talk about all the different things is important, because the fact is like you can talk to the left about these like parts of the drug war, you can talk to the right about these parts of the drug war and get everybody on board. But the fact is like it's just one of those things. Like I sometimes struggle of like, how far do I want to go in terms of wrapping my head around this narrative? Because the fact is like the drug war is one of the most evil things that has occurred in this country. And you can tell because, one, it's toppled governments across South America and elsewhere in pursuit of our goals as a country to diminish the drug supply. It's created cartels and gangs that have overrun those countries, which has then led to economic devastation, which creates an immigration crisis, which comes to our borders. Like, all of these things are arguments you can make to conservatives, and you can say, look at like the drug war has caused the immigration crisis we are dealing with presently. And so like then you have to then talk about the fact that like on top of that, it's also destroyed like entire cities, gang warfare across the country. It's destroyed families. It's incarcerated tons of fathers and Black men across the country. The drug war is so devastating across across all like demographics, which is fascinating. It's like and it affects all of us. Even if I'm like, oh look, that Black guy's going to get arrested, not me. The fact is I'm affected by the fact that those policies are going to like devastate communities that are right next door. And so like, what is the argument? The argument is that like you meet somebody and you find out what they care about, and you explain how the drug war touches every goddamn thing that they care about, the violence in schools and gun crime and healthcare and immigration, every single issue is touched by the drug war. And if we become fluent in recognizing that we can just say that, like, I think that there's so much value in that, because at this point I won't vote for a candidate that doesn't recognize the drug war needs to end, absolutely end completely, because it's a moral failing. It's an absolute moral failing in this country.
What's a small victory on that road?
Watching states decriminalize psychedelics is going to be probably the first step, because once psychedelics are more accessible, I think that more people are going to do them. And when more people do them, that's really going to help open up a dialogue in this country. And I think it's a dialogue that is desperately needed, because this country is full of polarized viewpoints that have no respect for nuance. And the nice thing about drugs is they give you lots of nuance. So I honestly think that that's going to be something. And I'm not saying let's dose the country and see what happens, but sometimes I think that'd be great. But no, the fact is that, like, these little victories are going to be about like the more that we can decrim and deprioritize enforcement of violence, the more that we can say, hey, these people need, like addiction care, not prison. The fewer people in jail cells, the better. And that's just like my beyond, like, that's my first initial thing, is like, the fewer people in jail cells, the better, because literally there are 500,000 people in prisons right now incarcerated on drug related charges. That's 500. Like, it's mind boggling to me. But I think that's the thing, is that, like, of course we're going to start with cannabis. We're going to start with psychedelics. And I'm extremely impatient and I want it all now. But I won't let perfect be the enemy of the good. But at the end of the day, like, that's where you need to push, is you need to push on like plant medicines and this kind of talk about the fact that they have medicinal benefits. This talk that people shouldn't be in prison for these things. And then having conversations about, like, how our communities, yes, of course, our communities are being devastated by, like, addictions to things like fentanyl or heroin and things like that. But how do we help those people? How do we, like, unfortunately, I feel like when we look at so many of the problems in America, and I'm not even talking about just the homeless crisis and drug addiction, but also like the increase of violent crime, of young people who just don't give a shit anymore and just like go into businesses and smash them up and steal everything, is I feel like we are at a turning point where we've stopped we've stopped selling people something to invest in. Like, their young people are not investing in capitalism. They don't believe it's going to work for them. And people who are struggling, who lost their homes and lost their jobs and have a bad back and took oxycodone and then ended up on heroin, like, they're not invested in a solution anymore, because they don't believe that one exists, because they don't believe the government can give it to them, and they don't believe that anyone else can, because they're just numbing the pain. And when you have communities of people who become divested, like they're no longer invested in this system, they're going to start trying to destroy that system. And I'm all about destroying the government, but there's a system and a community and a society that I actually am kind of fond of, that I like to have, like, protecting us and have like some sort of civil order. And I think that we need to like do more as libertarians, even to like reach into our communities and show people that the government doesn't need to be here and sending people to prison. We can look out for each other. And that's actually one of my biggest things. And sorry, I know I give the longest fucking answers and then I immediately digress.
All good.
But the fact is, like, one of the speeches I give at Anarchapulco, whenever I've spoken at Anarchapulco, I've given this speech called private solutions to public problems. And it's my what I tell people is that, like, instead of getting involved in Libertarian Party, instead of getting involved in partisan political activism, I tell people to get involved in entrepreneurial and nonprofit organizations that are solving a problem that the public has decided it needs to fix. And so, whether it's schools, whether it's roads, whether it's, healthcare, whether it's, it's addiction, you go, I care about this problem, and then you work together with a bunch of people who say, I'm not going to use government to solve this problem, but I want to solve this problem. And you work together to show that we can create private solutions to public problems. And when we do, we basically make government obsolete. And so I like one of my speeches that I give is I say, I don't believe in the abolition of government. I believe in its obsolescence. And so my goal and my job is to find ways to make the government obsolete. And I think that libertarian activism should actually be centered. Of course, we have to fight a political battle. The political spectrum is out there and it's going to send us to prison if we don't. But besides voting to legalize and decriminalize and do these things and educate people, the other things we need to do are to go into our communities, go into into nonprofits and entrepreneurial activities that say, let's solve problems, and then show people that they can be solved and government isn't needed.
I think that's it. I mean,
For
that was very profound. Tub, did you like her answer to your question?
I did. If I said no, what was going to happen?
Well,
I'll give you a whole other long explanation of something.
I can remove Tub from the studio at any given moment, and I love to wield my authoritarian power, as do all real libertarians. You know, in our heart of hearts,
we just want to.
We're just these authoritarian people that want you to live your best life according to what we believe, which is you should be able to live your best life. And, you know, I don't know how hard that is for the average American to understand. Like, damn, I want you to go out there and have fun and do what you want to do. As long as you're not hurting me, my friends, or anybody else, that's the hippiest point of view from libertarians. And I think
many people in this country aren't ready for real freedom. They're not ready for real personal freedom.
No, because that's government daddy.
Much.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that, because I actually wanted to end on Avens' point, but Tub just inspired me to say one more thing. And I think it all started after 9/11, where we began this hero worship of the government. And now if you question government, you're not a patriot and you're not a real American anymore. And I'm like, damn, when did we lose the theory of dissent being patriotic? Because if you're not going to question your government, they don't have to answer to you. And that's just the bottom line. You let these people do whatever they want. We're all in the same line, and eventually that's going to come back to you. And I think a lot of those J6er guys learned that the hard way, because they were all for, back to blue and all that stuff, till the blue showed up at their door and said, hey, you got to come with us because we don't like what you did. And now they're learning a lot of hard lessons, like you don't mess with the government as a individual. And that's one thing where I do believe in collectivism, is collectively as individuals, we need to hold our government accountable. Mm-hmm. Eric, do you have any closing remarks?
Word. No, I thought that was great. I think we covered a lot of it. We might not have got too much into maybe I guess the laws that have been changing, but it's different in California where, medical's been legalized for so long and recreational as well. And I'm from Florida in honestly, I don't even know the laws in North Carolina. I don't think it's legal recreational yet. It's kind of crazy that Republican Florida, it's a red state now, is about to get decriminalized marijuana before North Carolina. But
kind of weird.
I digress. Maybe next time we'll talk about the laws, or we'll see how things go in Florida. As many of comments were made, it's going to be big ag essentially is controlling the cannabis industry in the state of Florida. And I imagine they're funding both the Republican and Democrat side of the argument. So, and there have been, I think Trump came out in support of Amendment 3, passing it, decriminalizing. I don't know DeSantis' stance other than he said it doesn't smell good. So, but he's a nerd, so whatever.
Screwball.
I digress. This was a great episode. I had a lot of fun. Pleasure being on here as always.
Yeah, Florida's about to get Marlboro blunts, and it's going to be absolutely disgusting. Tub, do you have any closing remarks?
I will say this, that Eric, remember, I actively ran against Ron DeSantis. And
yep.
So I will say this. I think he is wrong. I don't care about weed, but I sure like the smell of it. I don't mind being around it when other people are smoking. And even though I think that we can remember that even if we advocate for the legalization of whatever drugs, I think we have to make sure we point out that just because it's legal doesn't mean people are going to do it. And so I think that becomes one of our arguments. I thank you for this time. I thank you for making me go look stuff up and do show prep, even though you don't really care, Marcus. Avens, thank you for coming on.
I do care. And I just want to make one closing statement. I want to thank Eric and Avens for coming on tonight. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure having you both.
Thank this podcast.
And our Florida guy, we wish everybody in Florida the best. Please evacuate, get to a safe area. But Mother Nature is a unforgiving winch, and she plays hardball.
She a bitch.
Well, yeah, we've been shaking like crazy out here. We had a nice. You probably didn't feel that one on Sunday because you were a lot further away than. It was right next door to me, but you know, the number of earthquakes we have had out here recently has been kind of nuts. It's been like every other week, seemingly.
Are you from LA originally? Or California, Southern California?
Yeah, Southern California, between South Bay and San Gabriel Valley for the most part.
Gotcha. Judd is also an LA native, and so he, like, every time I go, ooh, like there's a lot of earthquakes, he's always like, no, it's a good thing. Like, it's the earth getting the rattles out so the big one doesn't come. Like, that's his theory. I have no idea if there's any science behind it, but I like all those rumbles because I hope that means that, like, it's not saving up a big one for us.
Yeah, I hope so. Avens, your closing argument. Please tell how people could get in touch with you and your business and how to look you up and all that stuff.
Sure. So, one, you can basically Google me. You can find me on X. You can find me on Facebook. And I always use Avens O'Brien as my username. So, I don't know if it pops up on there, but it's AVENSOBRIN. My company is called Advanced Mycology. So Advanced Myco. We have our Mike Tyson shroom grow bag. And so we work with Mike Tyson on this grow bag. We have a bigger size. That's the Mike Tyson one. We have our mini. These allow you to grow mushrooms in 4 to 8 weeks, depending on which one you get. And then we also sell liquid culture. So I'm actually I'm an award-winning mycologist, which is fun. But the company is advancedmyco.com. That's advanced MYCO, myco, like mycology.com. But if you Google me, you can find me very easily, and I'm sure you guys can pop the name and the thing. I also have a Substack, which I do not update as regularly as I should, but it has a lot of my more cohesive and the arguments I like to make fully. It's like my evergreen statements about what I think about government and other things. And that's avens.substack.com. So that's usually the best place to find me, or actually all of my stuff. If you go to avens.me, literally that links to, it's basically almost like a link tree that just links to everything I do. So yeah, you guys can find me. I am very easy to find on the internet. And if you go to conventions, if you go to conferences, if you go to Burning Man, you will find me with a camera and I will take your picture because that's what I like to do.
Awesome. That Liberty lady wants to know, can we get a 2.0 episode in the future?
I don't see why not.
Can we do that without Marcus?
No, guys, they don't like you. Why would I come back?
I was kind of hoping you would say that about Tub and Eric, and we'll just have a nice one-on-one talk without all their blabbering.
What the fuck? Why do you
really that's California people it's so cool. Like Florida, ew. Florida, what? Ugh.
You said that from California.
Avens, I don't want to put you on the spot, and you don't have to answer now, but if Marcus hasn't already hit you up, if you want to be advertised on this podcast for Advanced Mycology, y'all need to talk about that offline.
Oh, I'll get you guys an affiliate code. You guys can get commission for sending people our way.
We could do that. Yeah. And sweet. Tub gets his share of that, which is all of 1.3%.
Hey, listen, for doing nothing?
Yeah, I mean, 1.3% for doing nothing. Sitting there writing down notes and not actually saying anything without us interrupting you.
That's considerably less than what you're paying me to be on these shows, which I appreciate.
That is cool.
Wait a minute, Eric didn't know that. Never mind, my bad. No, We're good.
That Liberty lady just asked. I'm just bringing. I also have birds. I don't know. She wanted me to mention that. So I have birds. I love
never
birds.
saw birds at your house. See, I've actually been to her house twice now. It's a nice drive in a big car, which is very inconvenient because I have a Suburban, and the road is like this.
I live in the hills. I live in the hills of Bel Air, so it's a bit of a curve. But
Yeah.
but no, that's the thing is I love doing events. That's the thing is our house is we host events for like we do cannabis mixers, we do psychedelic mixers, we do libertarian like party stuff. We're doing the LA County Libertarian Party is going to have their convention at our house because we can easily fit 200 people like no problem. Like that's an easy thing for us. We usually do like events with 100 or 150, and like we love hosting people because we want to show people like what liberty can be and what like it's really for me it's about kind of walking that talk. And so the way that I like take photos at like conventions and stuff, it's like I want to show people that like you can get together and make a cocktail hour where people can just talk about something passionately about like drug legalization or any number of issues, or like you've seen Chase Oliver at my house twice now. Like
right.
It's just a great opportunity to like meet people and just vibe and actually like have a social time. And I think so many libertarian functions are just like libertarians talking to other libertarians. And I'm just kind of over the circle jerk. So like, I really enjoy like bringing in like a bunch of friends from all different like walks of life and industries and things like that. And just having them all kind of meet and go, oh yeah, no, I like drugs. And then they're like, oh, but I'm a Democrat. And they hear a libertarian talk about something and they learn together and they go, oh, we're allies. And I love it when you can walk away from a conversation in which you generally disagree with someone politically and you can say, we're allies and like we can be allies on this thing. And that gives them more of an opportunity for like, you friend them on Facebook or you find them in any other context. And then, let's say there's a school shooting and you say something about how like, let's talk about what the actual like reasons for these kind of things are. And they suddenly see a different point of view. And because you're their ally on this one thing, they're willing to listen to you on this other thing. And so I think like building bridges is so essential because the amount of influence you can have by finding things that you connect with people over and then talking to them when current events come up, when things come up in which you have disagreements, you've humanized your side and you're able to then bring in arguments and plant seeds. And I think that's really that's the thing. They try to bury us, but they didn't realize we were seeds.
That's how libertarians should message our message going forward and bringing people in to the mix. So with that being said, everybody's good. No further. I want to thank our guest tonight because she was outstanding. And it was a pleasure to have you on. Wish I could say the same about our other company that we had tonight. About it being a pleasure, but it wasn't. So
I appreciated Tubbs' questions, and I thought Eric had some good points. And Marcus, you were an excellent host. So I'm sucking up to all of you a little bit, but I'm down to hang out with any of you anytime.
Okay, I really don't want to keep this going any further. I just completely disagree with you. But with that being said, I love you all. Even Tub, you're over here. I love you under the light of all of our creators. Eric, thank you very much.
I have to.
You broke up, and I don't know if I want you to repeat what you said, but go ahead and repeat what you said.
What'd you say, Tub?
Oh, I said I love you because Jesus tells me I have to.
Oh, well, as long as he's making
that's a good reason.
I guess so. All right. With that being said, this has been the Black Powder Podcast. Please go and like, follow, and support Avens in her mission because she's doing things for the right reason. Everybody does things for the right reason when it comes to being truly a libertarian. It's for you and you as the individual. So with that being said, as we always end this, live free or die.
Or die.
Peace.